everyone, and welcome to part 6 of how to implement a simple dialogue system in Unity. If you watched up to this point, you know that we've already implemented the system into Unity and it's working perfectly fine, and that this video is just about theory. So we're going to go ahead and talk about how we can turn this into editor code, although we're not going to create an editor. So this will just be talking theory. You know, that's kind of what I'm trying to get at. So with that being said, if you were to create an editor, I recommend turning this conversation, which currently inherits from nothing, to inherit from Unity Engine .Scriptable Object. What that will do is turn it into a physical object that you can create within the project, project area of Unity. So in here, you can create a conversation. So where it says C#, it'll say conversation, and you can create a conversation. Now, granted, you have to code that in. You can't just put this and assume that it's going to say something, but you can at this point add menu text that allows you to do that. So it would create a physical object with all of this information on it, and with all of this information on it, you can create a override for the inspector where it just has a single button that says open in the editor window, and then you can open a editor window that just edits conversations. This allows you to do multiple things. So first off, it allows you to edit conversations just by selecting them within the project folder, as opposed to navigating over a editor window for a database. That's one benefit. The second benefit is that when referencing conversations, for example, someone wants to have a conversation, but you got to tell them what conversation it is, instead of trying to link them up to the database and then giving them an ID for them to search up the the conversation and try to figure out what to say after that kind of thing. You can just drag and drop the conversation item or object onto or into the inspector where they're looking for a conversation. So expose it to the inspector, and you can drag and drop that object in like you would a reference to a transform or something like that. It's really simple to actually navigate and stuff like that. So you're able to edit it one-on-one, and you're able to drag and drop it within the Unity system. So it makes it really, really simple to actually use scriptable objects for this point. Secondly, if you're going to create an editor window, let's say you have nodes, representing all of these entries, I recommend creating a separate class, probably for both the conversation and the entry, with the word editor after it, or view, so like entry view or entry editor. But seeing as you're having the thing be called a conversation editor, most likely, I would probably say conversation view, or editor view maybe. But either way, so what it will have is a reference to an entry, for the entry one. For the entry view, it'll have a reference to the entry, but then it'll also have a reference to an ID. And that makes it really simple because you'll have a node. So for instance, let's see, I'm not going to get anything good here. Okay, so say that this represents a editor node, okay, or entry node. So conversation entry here, it's represented as a node. I can right click it and click add link, which was dumb in that case. Add link, and then I'll have a little line following my cursor around, waiting for me to click on a node to add the link to, and then click this one, and then it adds a link. Well, how did it add a link? Well, if the editor or the entry view has a reference to an ID and an entry, and I right click the entry view and click add link, it's going to add a link to the entry that's associated with this. And then when I left click here, it's going to say, well, I left clicked on another entry view that wasn't this entry view, so therefore it has a different ID than this one associated with it. Then it's going to say this entry dot add link to this ID, and now you have a system that adds the ID without having to look up the entry within the conversation entries dictionary here without having to look it up in there. You have a reference to that ID, so it makes that really, really simple as well. So yeah, that's what I would recommend. Likewise, other things that you can store on the entry view are, you know, the position, the node position on the canvas, node color, you know, just editor stuff that you don't want to associate with all entries, especially at runtime. Like, I mean, why do you need to know what the editor position editor position of an entry is at runtime? You don't. So storing it in an entry view is one way to separate the model from the view. And that's one thing that's focused on in the MVC pattern, model view controller, is just separating that logic and separating that data. I mean, it's all considered metadata compared to what you actually need in the runtime or at runtime. So yeah, I would recommend doing something like that. Likewise, when an entry is loaded up and you need to create nodes from that, you know, conversation or whatever. So when a conversation is loaded up, it'll just iterate through this list of entries and create conversation or create entry views and provide the integer to it and provide the integer ID to it and then provide the entry reference to it. And now you have a way of creating them as well. Likewise, you know, I mean, obviously you don't really need to save them, but if you do save them onto the conversation view, you can compare it and stuff like that. I mean, it just makes it pretty simple. But I recommend doing something like that if you were going to create an editor. Let's see, were there any other points that I wanted to cover? So all of this would be taken care of for you whenever you create a new node. You're creating a ID and comparing it to the conversation editor's ID, and then, you know, adding. So the conversation editor can keep track of the highest ID once you start, which if you're starting with a blank list is 0, and then it can give the ID to any of the conversation or the entry views that you're creating. It can give that ID to them, and then also save that into the conversations dictionary and stuff like that. But the editor would be able to keep track of all the IDs and stuff, and then just be able to assign stuff whenever you create a new node, so you don't have to do any of this. You don't have to do manual assigning or anything like that. Likewise, you don't even need to expose it in the editor when you're actually changing things. This doesn't even need to be a number that you need to expose. Therefore, needing to know the values, you don't have to do that. Or you don't have to keep track of any of that. So it just really simplifies the process, makes it all automatic for you if you actually go that route. And I mean, that's pretty much all I got for you. I mean, I already talked about adding links. Adding conditions would be done within like an inspector thing. I mean, you wouldn't really do it here. But let's say that you were to add a condition. There are multiple conditions that you can do. So I would almost say that for every condition, maybe make a view of a condition, or you would almost want the condition to be able to display itself on the GUI with all of its variables and stuff, so you can assign them automatically. But I'm not sure how you would go about doing that. I don't do many editor stuff. I've done some before, but I don't know. That would be something that's really interesting to look up through like Google or something. But yeah, either way, that looks like it would take care of everything. I mean, it's really simple as far as design goes. Coding it might not be as simple as this tutorial was, but if you have questions or how I would recommend going about doing something that I didn't cover, feel free to leave that in the description or in the comments below. I'm sorry it's really late at night or in the morning. I've been up since like 8 o'clock this morning, well, yesterday morning, so almost 24 hours. But yeah, either way, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and like and subscribe.